Good evening, everyone. Randy Weir, out here in Colorado. Hope everyone's staying warm. We got a cold snap coming in and snow here in Colorado. Supposed to get several inches of snow overnight, which is always fun. I have another great guest tonight. First thing I want to talk about, my new book. It's coming out May 3rd. It's on pre-order right now. My new series, Justice for the Forgotten, is the name of the book, Steel Wheels Cold Mystery, dealing with a retired Westminster police officer, which is, of course, where I live. And it's 99 cents as an ebook. I think you can find that change in your sofa at home to buy that. If you're interested, please check it out. Here's my new logo as well for the series. And yes, we do have a canine in the series, a Belgian Malinois named Kogel. So hopefully everyone will check out the new book, and trying to get a lot of pre-sales before the release and getting some good reviews, at least early on so far. So, but anyway, on to my guest. So I'm going to bring her up here. We had a little ghostly image of her early, but this is Elizabeth Crowens. How are you doing, Elizabeth?
Pay no attention to the background behind the curtain. Yes. Hi, how are you?
Doing well. And how's weather in your side of the world? Are you having a cold winter?
It is freezing, and we had snow too. We've had more snow this year than we have for quite a while. So, which is, Manhattan doesn't get as much as some of the surrounding areas because I think the buildings hold in heat or something. But we've had a lot of snow this winter. So I'm kind of glad I bought my snow boots about 2 years ago.
Well, and it probably holds the heat in the summertime too, right? So it's nice and hot. Right?
For sure.
Yeah. Well, great. I appreciate you on. You and I had connected a little bit through Facebook before, but I finally got to meet you at Killer Nashville last year. You actually had the table behind me in the author room. And I was going, oh, Elizabeth's behind. I got to say hi. And I introduced myself. And I was that mysterious person who's posted on your Facebook occasionally. We'll talk about some of your Facebook stuff as we get going here, because there's so much crap on Facebook, and you have some fun stuff sometimes, which is fun to read. I always enjoy finding things that aren't political.
You know what? I will censor my caption contest, which I know is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And if somebody makes political comments anyway, I tend to delete them. So, I mean, I have my own personal feelings, but I don't post them on Facebook. So, and when somebody, starts getting a little snarky, I've been banned, I've been censored from Facebook before. So for the most ridiculous things. I mean,
I've been Facebook themselves. They have that algorithm that looks at stuff, and it goes, okay, you did something you shouldn't against the terms of service. You're suspended for a week or 30 days or whatever. It's like,
I had a photo. It was really funny. It was like it was an old photo. It looked like it was taken like in the 1920s. You didn't even see any frontal nudity. Okay. But it was a bunch of young boys that had gone skinny dipping, but you see them running away. So you only see them from behind. Okay. Right. And they're being like chased by a schoolmaster with like a cane or something, like these kids, were supposed to be in boarding school and they went out skinny dipping and I'm chasing after them. And it was a funny photo. And as I said, there was nothing offensive. And they were right by the water. They were right by a lake. So you could tell the kids just went skinny dipping, right? But it was all shown from behind. So as I said, no frontal nudity. And I got flagged. And they put me on like a 30-day restriction. Yeah. And I couldn't like or respond to anybody's post for 30 days. It was ridiculous. I was in Facebook jail for this silly, stupid photo that was not offensive. And I've had that done before. And sometimes, I'll find photos and they're funny and they look borderline. And I was ready to say, I don't want to chance it. And I hate that, but they do that. So because of that, I also have to unfortunately censor any political or really highly sexually charged, comments that anybody might make from my caption contest. So, what can I say? I don't like doing it, but I also don't like being put in Facebook jail. So.
Well, the thing is, you look at Facebook and you see ads up in the corner with provocative women. At least I do, and I'm a male, so maybe you get provocative men. Who knows? But
somebody worse, I saved it, and I did a screenshot of it, and I was gonna post it, and I was sort of say no. And this guy was paying money. Okay, this was a paid sponsored ad. And this guy was explaining something, and he was using one of those blow up plastic sex dolls to do it. But it was for something non-sexual. That's what was so funny about it. It was like, I can't even remember what he was advertising, but he was clearly using one of those plastic blow-up sex dolls to demonstrate something. And it's like, what the, I couldn't believe that this guy didn't get put in Facebook jail. So
it wasn't first aid, was it? Mouth-to-mouth first aid or anything, right?
I know, I don't think it was, but I can't remember what was off the top of my head. They probably didn't put him in Facebook jail because he paid money to put the ad there.
Yeah, that's right. If you pay ads, you can get away with whatever you want, I guess, right?
Oh,
so
God, I don't know.
I just soon not pay Zuckerberg any money. He makes enough as it is.
Yeah, right.
Well, tell us a little about yourself. Let everybody know the important stuff about yourself.
Right. Well, I'm bi-coastal. I live in New York City, but I bounce back and forth to Los Angeles all the time, several times a year. I'm trying to move back there permanently. I write.
Right.
The golden age of Hollywood. I've worked in the entertainment industry for many, many years in one capacity or another, primarily as a publicity still photographer on movie sets and television shows. So, but I've done a lot of other things too. So, sometimes you have to do things to survive and, or there's a downturn or you've got a family issue or something and you can't be, working those kind of hours. So I've worn a lot of hats, but most of them have been somehow connected with the entertainment industry.
And how is it working with the entertainment industry?
Well, right now I'm writing about it. So in the golden age of Hollywood. And,
yes.
And it's funny, I just had a dream the other night where I was back in action and working on the movie sets. And there's always an issue. Like I haven't updated my camera equipment or something. And that's usually like a repetitive theme I get, And actually, if I did get back into that, I would have to, update my camera equipment. So, it's not that far from the truth.
So I saw on your bio on your website, you've written for some magazines through the years, some short stories, things like that. Is that kind of where you got started being an author?
That was my first quote unquote professional, something I got paid for. Mm-hmm. I started, I actually kind of got the bug with screenwriting back in college. And my major was photography. My minor was film studies. And I liked the idea of screenwriting because, let's face it, filmmaking is a very collaborative thing, and it's also very expensive. Nowadays, this back then when I was in college, everybody was shooting on film. Now you've got all these digital, people literally filming movies with your cell phones. Mm-hmm. That technology did not exist. It was very expensive to be even a film student. When I went to college, you had to be shooting 16 millimeter film. You had to purchase the film. You had to process the film. You had to cut it in an editing room. It was, this was before people had computers, and Final Cut Pro and, some of the, different editing softwares and even screenwriting softwares. There was no screenwriting software. But for some reason, I could just get the ideas out of my head, and all I needed was my electric typewriter and paper. It was a fairly inexpensive, investment. So that's kind of how I started. But fortunately or unfortunately, I went to film school in New York City. And New York City was very different in their aesthetic than Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, for the most part, they tried to teach you practical filmmaking, how the studios and even the independents were doing it at the time. In New York, when I went to film school, my teachers came from like the Andy Warhol school. I got my introduction, outside of actually my film history teacher, who did show us a lot of the classic Hollywood films. But I remember my cinematography teacher. She was like a Fellini. I was like, these were really artsy, non-commercial films. And unfortunately, that was the foundation and the background of a lot of my instructors. So when I eventually went to Hollywood, I'm thinking, I've got all these great ideas for spec scripts, but it's not, I was not ready to be in like a writer's room. And it's too bad, because that would have been probably the way to go as far as maybe making some decent money as a writer in the industry was concerned. But my head wasn't in that space. My head was in these crazy European art films, which weren't making it. I don't know even how they got financed, frankly.
Right.
In fact, even some of even people like Woody Allen, I mean, his stuff, most of them were blockbusters, compared to, some of the standard American, films. So, unfortunately, that my head was more into that kind of crazy, artsy, independent space, and I needed a paycheck. So, I came out to Hollywood as a single mom, and, definitely couldn't afford to, try to write spec scripts. So since my background was photography and cinematography as well, I just managed to get into the still photography. And that's how I broke in with film production. And I did a few other things too, but that's kind of how I broke in. And unfortunately, I did not get to do any writing when I was out there with all the long, crazy hours I was working. And this was before people had laptops that they could bring to the set and maybe do a few things on the side. I hate to say it, even when I was, had downtime on the set, I was editing slides, or running to the photo lab or picking up new, film and getting my cameras repaired. So, I really did not have any free time to even do any writing on the side. So I had to kind of get out of that mode to be able to get back into the writing mode.
Well, and on film sets too, those are brutally long days, right? Don't they work 16, 18-hour days?
Oh, I actually have done one film. It was one of my first, and not a union film, obviously. It was a 21-hour day.
Oh.
I do not recommend that. It was not fun. But I have.
Did they at least give you a trailer to sleep in?
They should, but only if one of the top stars, maybe.
Yeah, the big guys, they always get those nice trailers they can go into, at least lay down and sleep, right?
People like David Hasselhoff. Yes, of course. I worked on Baywatch for 3 years.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow.
Yeah. But no, I was considered what we call below the line. So I was, low person on the totem pole here. There was no way in the world I would get a trailer. So if I was lucky, maybe I could sneak off and, set a timer and take a nap in my car or something.
Does your name show up in the trailers at the end of the show? In there somewhere? No.
Oh, the trailers. You know what? believe it or not, many times it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, these days they run them past so fast now
oh, I
because
know.
they want more commercials. So
Sure. And if you're watching it on television or Netflix, you know,
yeah,
it runs through really fast. I did a lot of some of my bigger credits were actually on television shows, and they never give the still photographer credit
yeah,
on a television show. They only give like a few people credits. Also, Elizabeth Crowens is my pen name. So
right.
you'll never see Elizabeth Crowens. When I talk to people in the industry, I say, don't look Elizabeth Crowens up on IMDb. You will not find me. I'm listed under the name that was, you know, my
Right.
union card was under. So, but believe it or not, I actually do have some bizarre credits here and there. I actually have a few acting credits, no SAG card, no Screen Actors Guild card, but I was recruited at the last minute to be an ER nurse in a vampire movie. And I actually got a credit on IMDb as this ER nurse.
And as an ER nurse, were you treating someone who had been bitten by a vampire?
Yes, no, I was. I was one of the people pushing the gurney into the emergency room. A woman had been bitten by a vampire, and she ends up turning into a vampire. So yes.
There's no shots to cure that one, so right, no
No,
medicine, right?
not. And of course, we didn't know what was wrong with her. We just, you know, saw her come in, you know, or somebody's, you know, the EMTs or whatever brought her into the ER, and then we took over and wheeled her into the OR, and somehow I managed to get screen credit on that one. So.
So you obviously enjoyed writing. You like to write. Who were some authors that inspired you to want to be a writer that you enjoyed reading through the years? Anyone in particular?
My background is so film oriented.
Yeah.
That I would say when I was around, I'd say 16. When I was really, really young, I always liked kind of writing, but I was more of a visual artist. And actually, at one point, I thought I was going to become a fashion designer. So I was always like doing sketches, but unfortunately, kind of dropped out because I'm terrible at sewing. Same thing with IKEA furniture. If there's a way to put it together upside down and backwards, that's exactly the way I'll end up doing it. But I really loved film and cinematography, and I was always my father was an amateur photographer, and I was always fascinated and couldn't wait to get my very first camera. And I remember when I was about 16, or 16 or 17, I went to see A Clockwork Orange for the first time.
Sure.
And I was so blown away by the cinematography. Between that and eventually Star Wars, you know, coming out, I just said, I got to work in the movie industry. I'm sorry. You know, this is just way too cool. You know, it kind of had kind of the narrative that, you know, the writing had, and yet it had the visual. So I actually was hoping to get into cinematography, but it was a very closed field at the time. It still is, but very closed field for women.
For women, yeah.
There really were very few women cinematographers. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact, at least this is my theory, and I've talked to a lot of people in the industry and they've kind of agreed with me, is creative wise on a movie set, the director has ultimate control. However, a lot of times the director, because I've worked in other capacities and I've watched the interaction between the director and the cinematographer, a lot of times the director does not understand the technical aspects. You know, they're working with the actors and the dialogue and the overall feel. And ultimately, the top technical director is your cinematographer, or your DP, or director of photography. And that person can step in and basically say to the director, it's going to take too long to light this scene, or we're going to have to rebuild the set to give you what you're looking for. Okay. Or the shot is going to take this long to do, or whatever. Or it can't be lit this way. We can't put a light over there because it's going to cause this problem over here. So, and there are, some directors that do understand the technicality, especially if they actually were originally cinematographers. And that happens sometimes. People will transition from being the director of photography to the director. But a lot of times you'll get a director that doesn't have the technical down as much as obviously the director of photography. And at that point, the director of photography has to kind of step in and take over, and say, we got to do it this way, And a lot of male directors don't want to hear that from a woman, particularly. It's a tough thing. Sure. And also, I don't know. I mean, it's gotten better over the years, but if you look at the rosters of the Directors Guild and also the Cinematographers Guild, primarily male, as far as the top positions are concerned. You get a lot of female assistant directors and production managers and unit production managers. You also get a lot of women camera assistants. But, still, it's that top of the pyramid there that it really, there aren't that many. And certainly when I tried to break into the business, very few. So it was easier for me. And of course, I wouldn't have been able to start at the top anyway. I would have had to start at the bottom. But it was easier for me to break into the business as a still photographer because I already have the skills.
So you said you like the visual, so movies and television. Yes. So what transitioned you to say, okay, I want to try to do this on paper now and write stories and all that?
Well, I had tried, at first with the screenplays. Mm-hmm. And but again, what I was coming up with was really artsy, mm-hmm. really non-commercial. So
you need to live in Europe, huh?
Yeah, I know, right? And get like some European film fund, financing or something. And they did have some stuff like that. But I always wondered, I was like looking at a clip from a Fellini movie recently, and I'm thinking, how did this guy get financed? They're wonderful, wonderful movies. But, again, commercially, you wonder, how much money did they really make? I was watching a documentary of Ingrid Bergman recently. And apparently Rossellini, her second husband, his movies didn't make any money. And she didn't get paid all that much, and her career wasn't doing very well, when she was in his films. But he was constantly making them, and they weren't even getting very good reviews. And somehow he kept on making them. So, you wonder.
Maybe he had mob money behind him or something, right?
that part they didn't get into on the documentary, but apparently, as I said, his stuff was not well received, put it that way.
So the book series that you've released recently, you've got 2 books so far, and I think it's supposed to be a 3-book.
Yes.
Contract, right? So yes. Tell us about the first one, which is, and I got that up there, The Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles. So yes. This kind of goes back to the love of Hollywood here.
Yes, it does. It takes place in 1940 in the golden age of Hollywood. And there's a really funny story behind how I came up with this. It kind of comes from several angles, though. I had a dear friend who passed away about 7 years ago at the age of 93. And she was an actress in Hollywood in the 40s. And she would tell me stories. And she started out as a client of mine, and we ended up becoming best friends. And I eventually wound up being her caretaker, but before she passed away. But she would tell me all these great stories over the years that we knew each other. And she wanted me to do a memoir for her because she knew I was writing my first book, which was a science fiction novel. And she, would tell me these stories. But again, I was so busy trying to launch, finish writing and launch my first book that I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them. And I was looking for an agent myself at the time. And I said, I told her, I said, I hate to tell you, but one of the hardest type of books to sell is a memoir. And unless you're really famous or notorious, right. If you had like a major political falling out and, did something scandalous, yeah, you'll probably get a book deal, or Hillary Clinton got $1 million advance, for her biography or whatever. So, but I told her, I said, I actually knew a guy who climbed Mount Everest, and he ended up having to, which no small feat, right? He ended up having to self-publish his memoir. He found an agent couldn't sell it. And I was like, so you're kidding me. It's like, you climbed Mount Everest. This is exciting. And it was, he apparently kind of hit rock bottom. He had an alcoholism problem. And then when he turned himself around, he decided he wanted to go mountain climbing. And he started small, but went, I guess, on the 7 highest peaks or whatever. And eventually, of course, went up to Everest and did it. And to him, not only was, yay, I made it to the top of Mount Everest, but it was a major turnaround, of his life. And I guess that's what his pitch was. And he had to self-publish it. He couldn't find, a traditional publisher to do his memoir for him. So I told her, I said, this is going to be tough because you weren't a famous actress. You've got some great stories, but, she had like few seconds that survived on film as a background extra, and she was up for one really big film with a big star, but she wouldn't sleep with the studio head. So she kind of got blackballed that way, and she, kind of soured on the industry and said, you know what, I'm just going to drop out and do something else, but I like living in LA. So she ended up doing a few other things. But when I was trying to figure out how to package some of her stories, all of a sudden one day the light bulb went off. And I said, you know what, I'm going to fictionalize you. I'm going to turn you into a female PI in 1940. I said, how's that? She said, oh, I like that idea. And then I told her why. And I said, well, what do you read when you go to the library? You always check out a mystery. I said, what's on television all the time? I said, oh, it's either TCM, it's Law and Order, it's NCIS, it's Murder, She Wrote, or it's like Animal Planet, or Nat Geo Wild. And she used to always tell me these stories about rescuing animals. I said, you're going to be a PI from 1940. You're going to have your own agency with a male sidekick, and you're going to rescue animals. She said, I love it. So we made it official. I worked with her estate attorney, and we drew up the paperwork. And, so there would never be a question that I had the rights to her life story. And unfortunately, she passed away before I got Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles came out. But the Babs Norman character is inspired, you might say, by my friend. So that's my tribute to her. And because she liked animals, I figured, okay, well, I wasn't planning on, quote, an animal mystery series, but I figured, she loves the animals. who else loves animals? Okay, like famous celebrities. And there's quite a few actually. But
Sure.
and I learned that, in researching the book. But it happened to be that my science fiction series was one of the featured characters was Arthur Conan Doyle. So I knew a lot about not only Conan Doyle, but a lot of the Sherlock Holmes, movies, books, stories. And I figured, well, this is perfect. And of course, who? 1940, Hollywood. We're talking about Basil Rathbone, of course. So I started, picking up some biographies of him. And he was a major animal lover. And he loved dogs. He always had at least 5 dogs, several cats, and canaries. So I figured, and I was reading some stories about him and his dogs, and I figured this is perfect. Somebody's going to take one of his dogs. We're going to have a dog napping thing. And it didn't even occur to me that this was starting to become a major deal in Hollywood right now. The people's dogs were being stolen. And like, I think after I had finished the book, the big thing hit the news about somebody had stolen Lady Gaga's dogs, and they shot her dog walker. I mean, It was like crazy, and all this nutty stuff was coming down in the news about, people's dogs, disappearing in Hollywood. So, which, as I said, the book was already written. It hadn't been published, I think, yet, but it was already written at that point. So I wasn't influenced by that, but the timing was uncanny for sure. And but all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, well, we got the start of a book, with Basil, and of course Sherlock Holmes, he's a detective, and we've got 2 young PIs who have an agency that's kind of failing and they could use the boost. But between you and me, Basil's dogs are not famous. I needed a famous dog that we could recognize from the screen. And that's and that just happened to be on TCM that evening. The Thin Man was playing. And I'm thinking, Asta, I love Asta. Asta's like my favorite part of those movies. So I figured, okay, we'll have him rope in William Powell and Myrna Loy. And then, of course, I had to start reading biographies on Dashiell Hammett, and who's featured right there. And I was learning a lot of really interesting things about these people that I could kind of put into a mystery. So I had a lot of fun, putting that together. I just wish my friend were around to read the book.
Yeah. So Babs Norman is the private eye. That's not her name. I'm assuming your friend's name, right? You changed the name?
Correct.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you that. What inspired you? A female detective, obviously at that time would have been very unusual as well. But obviously your friend. So what's her character? Do you think your character-wise, is she very similar to your friend in the way she acts and behaves, or do you think you've changed her kind of the way she is quite a bit?
More like Lois Lane or Torty Lane. She's a little more aggressive. I would say my friend was a little, what to say, sexier, in a certain, she was gorgeous. My friend, she showed me some photos of her from the 1940s. And believe it or not, she looked a lot like Natalie Portman. I mean,
really?
Very attractive, woman. She did a lot of modeling, but she, I would say she was not as cut and dry and aggressive that Babs Norman. Babs Norman kind of has to fight for her credibility. Because a lot of times people will, her agency goes by B. Norman Investigations. And if they walk in and they see her partner, who's male, they assume he's the owner of the agency.
Right.
So it's one of those things. They don't believe that she's credible. She's always kind of fighting for her credibility. So, and back then, unfortunately, a woman would have to. You
Sure.
know, most women, their job was to get married and stay at home. Have the babies, take care of the husband. So, there weren't as many career women back then, and she was an exception.
So Guy Brandt is her sidekick, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
Which is unusual, a man being a sidekick to a woman,
Right.
Obviously it seems odd. And so what's their relationship like? Is it contentious? Do they work together well, or?
Very Nick and Nora Charles. They do work together well, but they do argue. And he is also a former actor and wasn't getting anywhere, and wasn't happy with where his career was going. But he also has a challenge. He's a closeted gay man, and
Sure.
Back in the 40s, you had to be closeted.
Sure.
This was something you were not out in the open. So, but
Well, it's even somewhat still true today. I mean, there's some of that now is. It's become more contentious now. We won't get into the politics of it, but I mean,
right.
It's more contentious again with what's going on. And
yeah. Now he, many times has to kind of fight for his credibility too. So, and sometimes he'll come on. I'm just trying to get this reflection. Let's get rid of it. I got the terrible reflection on my one lens on my glass. But he, he'll go. He's kind of a slight guy. He's not, he's not a real big, beefy guy, but he's not effeminate. But I'd say he's maybe about 5'7" and about 130. But unfortunately, he's a bit of a fashion hound, and sometimes he gets picked on. So, he tries to go to the gym to try to build up a few muscles, and he's got his challenges too. But they work well together. But again, they'll tend to bicker too, like a married couple. So, and they have a janitor, their handyman from their office building, likes to, make jokes and call him Nick and Nora Charles all the time. So, the fact that they're actually dealing with the actors that play Nick and Nora Charles is very amusing. So, and yes, they do drink a lot in the book.
Well, and there's a lot of smoking too. I noticed. I've been reading your second book, and Hollywood. Everybody smoked in Hollywood in those days. It was just the thing.
And they all died of lung cancer.
That's right. A lot of them did die of lung cancer fairly young. I mean, I think that's what got Humphrey Bogart, which he's in your second.
Yeah, no, I think he was in his 50s, and he had esophageal, or however you pronounce it, cancer in the esophagus. Yeah.
So how does a guy feel about all the animals? I was reading the second book. He seems like he's a little put off with all the dogs and the cats, and there's a pelican, I think, in the second book. And
she gets a little too I don't know if sappy is the word, but she just gets too sympathetic to bringing in animals, and it gets to the point where they've somehow have gotten a reputation in the neighborhood, and people just drop off boxes.
Just bring them, yeah.
And neither one of them knows where that comes from. But there is kind of in the opening scene of the first one, somehow Babs found the wounded pelican at the beach. It's got a pelican walking around their office, but that pokes. Pokes Guy, so he sometimes calls him Pokey the Pelican, and he also likes stealing guys' donuts. So
and he can take a lot of donuts and store them in that
the pouch, right?
Exactly. Yes, in the pouch. Yes.
Exactly. So, but yeah, they have managed. But apparently, in the first book, Babs she ends up adopting a Irish Wolfhound mix. Quite by accident. She's trying to find out about police search and rescue dogs, and she goes to a park with one of the people from the trainers from the Los Angeles Police Department, and he's trying to show her how, kind of giving her demonstration with one of his dogs that he's training, and somehow they find this stray that's better than his trained dog, and the stray towards the end ends up hopping in a taxi with Babs and wants to get adopted. And the dog actually becomes a hero in helping them find the stolen dogs towards the end of book 1. So in book 2, they have kept this dog. This is a good dog. You want to keep this dog around. So, and his name is called Sir Henry of the Baskervilles.
The Baskervilles, yeah.
Yes.
So you gave me this one too. This
Oh,
was
yes, that's Asta. That's William Powell and Asta. So Asta is great. In fact, Asta has probably been in well over 36 films, including, and I've got it written, it's in the first book, that his very first movie that he was in, he's uncredited, but it's called Merrily We Go to Hell.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's something crazy like that. But he also is in a really great, it's a Cary Grant film. Well, he's George. Actually, he's in more than one Cary Grant film. He plays George in Bringing Up Baby.
This
He's
is
the one
another
who throws
Asta
the
there.
dinosaur bone. Yes.
He has his own chair even.
Yes, he does. He has his own director's chair.
That's funny. And what type of dog is that?
He is a wire-haired fox terrier.
Fox
And
terrier.
believe it or not, and I do have it in a dialogue in my book, Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, is that Hammett, in his original Thin Man book, Asta was a Schnauzer.
Yeah.
And he was, but they could not find a Schnauzer that was well trained enough to be able to be for to act in the Thin Man film. So they ended up changing it to a wire-haired fox terrier.
And obviously knew how to act because he was in a lot of films. So
He was the highest paid dog in Hollywood at the time. He made more than his owners. His owner was actually a prop master. And the dog ended up making more money than him. He was able to quit his job. And then they ended up working with a famous trainer that worked with Asta for years. Yeah. And Asta had a lot of puppies. So, they substituted some of the puppies, but none of the puppies were ever as well trained as Asta ever was.
So this book's up for a big award.
It's actually up for it's won 2 already.
2,
Won first prize in the Chanticleer Review Mystery and Mayhem competition, as well as their Mark Twain competition for humor last year. And then it's up for an Agatha Award for Malice Domestic this year. And it also just advanced to the semifinals of the Screencraft Cinematic Prose Contest. So, if I win that one, some production company will put an option on it and try to shop it around, try to see if they could get a financing and producer attached and everything for it. But for the Malice, believe it or not, I am up for best first novel, and I did want to clarify to everybody, it is like their particular rules compared to other conferences. It's best first mystery novel. So you are allowed to have published in other genres previous to that. Whereas most conventions, if it's the best first novel, it's your first novel of any genre. Right. But this one, for Malice, it's strictly mystery. So, because I had it clarified actually twice by the chairperson. Yes, Malice Domestic. And she said, no, in fact, she called me. she called me to congratulate me, which I've never had anybody, call me on the phone and say, congratulations, you're up on the ballot. But no, she called me last week and we discussed it. And I said, I just want to make sure. It said, no. It is your first mystery novel. I said, no, you're absolutely right. It is. I have written, I edited an anthology, and I also wrote 3 science fiction books. So, but that still qualified me because it was my first mystery.
So what is it like writing a period piece like that? I'm sure it takes a lot of research.
Yes,
there's no cell phones. I mean, probably wasn't even, there's no TVs at that time either, I'm sure. It was all film, right?
There weren't. People listened to the radio broadcast.
Radio, yeah.
Yes. In fact, believe it or not, because I looked it up and I was ready to say, wait a minute, were there beginnings of television? They were working on the technology, but it wasn't open to the general public yet. So there was television technology around, I think, in 1940, but the actual public broadcasts were still a few years away on that one. But people, if they had news, they listened to the radio. And that was a big thing, radio shows. In fact, Basil Rathbone did like about 50, he did a whole bunch of radio shows after they, while they were filming some of the Sherlock Holmes films, but also after, for a while, they were doing quite a few radio shows. And then he dropped out because he got tired of it. And Nigel Bruce remained, but they put some of the latter ones, they had a different guy doing the voiceover of the radio shows for Sherlock Holmes. But yeah, no, radio was really big. You also had to realize that, police technology was pretty old fashioned. So you didn't have, like, I would have to look up, how would somebody call something in, And a lot of times people had to use payphones, which are kind of ancient these days. But, there were certain police radios, in the car, on certain bandwidths and stuff. But a lot of times, people were even doing an investigation where they were, compared to today, operate in the dark. Because they
no DNA, obviously, way before DNA.
They actually did start doing, well, I know they did fingerprinting.
Fingerprinting, they did.
Yeah, they definitely did fingerprinting back then. They didn't do, I don't think, the DNA evidence. I'm trying to remember what else they did, but definitely did fingerprints. But
you could do blood typing, I'm sure, and things like that. But.
Yeah, and they did do crime scene photography.
Right.
You did have a crime scene photographer.
Big giant camera with a big flash on it, right?
Yes,
probably had to change out each picture they had to take, right?
Leading Crown graphics. Yes, I actually have used those, by the way.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Being a photographer, I'm sure you probably had. They might be worth some money if you still had the cameras.
No, I actually, it was part of a class that I took, and I borrowed the school's camera, But no, I actually enjoyed using. I had borrowed a Crown graphic for a large format photography class, and really enjoyed using it. And I actually just had to write a scene for book 3 that I'm working on, where Babs's the crime scene photographer's got a crush on her, and it's kind of like a little bit of a subplot. And she's talking to one of the main actors, and they're having a party, and he wants to they've hired the photographer, to do publicity. And, he rushes up and, of course, blinds him in the eye with the flash. And she literally, and I know this because I've used one of these cameras, she takes the film pack out and takes the dark slide out.
Right.
Exposes his film and said, you didn't, basically, you didn't ask permission.
Right.
you know, and thank you for blinding me, you know. So, but I could say that because I've used one of those cameras and I know how they operate. So, you know, it's fun when you can use your knowledge and kind of, you know, throw that in. So.
Yes. Well, and you've got the clothing for the time and the cars and all that. So
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I make it's kind of an inside joke, but the car that Babs drives is a Crossley, and you got to Google it because it looks like a clown car. It's a
I was gonna say, I don't think I've heard of that one.
it's an ugly, funny car that I think they started manufacturing in the late 30s and stopped manufacturing them maybe around the mid to late 40s. And it was a cheap, you know, it was almost like our version of a Gremlin or a Yugo.
So I was just gonna say a gremlin, right? That's what it kind of sounded like, you know, one of those
Definitely
really
like,
junky cars you see a few of anymore driving around, and you go, wow.
right, it's like our version of the Gremlin or the Yugo. But the
Yes.
one of the reasons why I decided to have her, and she doesn't even own a car in the first book. You know, she gets a little money, and that's one of the things that she decides to do. But she didn't want to blow it and get a really nice, you know, snazzy, expensive car. She ends up getting a used Crossley. And the bit about the Crossley comes from the fact that if you ask me whose books are most similar to like the type of books you write, I would say Stuart Kaminsky. And a lot of people don't know who he is, okay, which is tough because, you know, for a pitch, that's rough, you know, because, you know, a lot of people say, who's Stuart Kaminsky? You know, they want somebody contemporary that, you know, has been a bestseller in the last, you know, 2 years or whatever. You know, not somebody who was really big in the 70s and 80s. You know, yeah, especially if you're pitching to like a young editor, you know, who, you know, certainly would have been working at the editing house in the 70s and 80s. But Stuart he's actually very prolific. And I think he was actually president of Mystery Writers in America at one point. But he has his Toby Peters series. And they're comical mysteries, and there's always a celebrity involved. And he's got kind of this bumbling male PI. He used to be on the force. He got himself in trouble. He got kicked out. His brother is like the head of his division, and they don't get along all that well. And his brother's always having to bail him out when he gets thrown in jail. He's working as a PI. Now, he's a bit over the top compared to Babs. Babs is a little more straightforward than Toby Peters. However, Toby Peters is always driving a Crossley. It's always breaking down. So, kind of as an homage to Stuart Kaminsky, I had Babs driving this clown car. So that's where that comes from.
So that's your first book. So let's talk about your second one. And let me find the cover here because the screen is small here for me today. So there we go. Bye Bye Blackbird. So you have a lot of famous people in the first book, and you got a lot of well-known in the second book, and you've got a few that have carried over into both, right?
Yes. And I have a few that will carry over into the third book.
Yeah.
So, but yes, at the very end, no dogs die, by the way. Okay. You know,
that's a bad thing. I killed a dog off in one of my books, and I hear more crap about that. You can kill all the humans you want, but if you kill an animal, especially a dog or a cat. Oh.
Well, we do have some dead birds, okay, in by Blackbird, but we never see anybody kill them.
Yes.
Okay, and they're actually
even a taxidermist, what you have in the book.
Yes, exactly. Somebody has a fetish for taxidermy here. Our killer does, at least. And But with Bye Bye Blackbird, I kind of dropped a very large hint in the last chapter of Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles. There's a big celebration on the MGM lot, and when all the animals that have been dog napped are rescued and returned to their owners. And many of the owners bring their dogs to this big picnic that they've got on the studio lot. And it happened to be that at one point, there's this little scruffy dog that runs up to Guy Brandt while Babs is off talking to some FBI agents, I think, and wrapping up the case. And Humphrey Bogart chases after the dog. And Humphrey explains that this was Pard, who plays the dog in High Sierra. And and apparently the trainer comes and fetches the dog, and they have a brief conversation that Humphrey had offered to buy the dog, but he needed it, as a movie dog. He didn't want to sell it to Humphrey. But apparently one of Humphrey's dogs, a Newfoundland named Cappy, was one of the dog nap dogs. And he starts a conversation with Guy, and Guy gives him his business card. He said, well, you're an up and coming actor. You never know. There might be some crazies out there in Hollywood who want to blackmail you. You might need a PI at some point. So he gives him the card, and he says, you never know. And they walk away. And apparently he needs a PI in the very first chapter of Bye Bye Blackbird, because somebody has left a canopic jar with a mummified crow inside of it on his doorstep. And it happens to be when he comes to the PIs to ask, what's the meaning of this? And is somebody giving a threat against me? Just happened to be that there was a female corpse that kind of fell into the PI's office with a feathery thing sticking out of her overcoat, very similar to what happened to Captain Jacoby when he rescued the Maltese Falcon in the script. So, all this kind of happens at once, and they've got, LAPD detectives coming in, check in the crime scene, and Bogart is there, and all of a sudden, immediately, the cops think that maybe Bogart's involved with this. So that's how Bye Bye Blackbird starts at the very beginning. So we've got apparently some very strange threats are being made against the cast of the Maltese Falcon. And they're worried that they're not going to be able to finish filming this thing because somebody might also die. So that's kind of where the book 2 starts. So we've got, we carry over Dashiell Hammett, because he also wrote the Maltese Falcon as well as the Thin Man, winds up, for some scenes in the book 2. And then, of course, we've got the cast of the Maltese Falcon, and even Basil Rathbone makes a cameo, an important cameo. I tell them, my Sherlock Holmes fans, that he has a small role, but an important one in book 2.
Well, and John Huston,
yes,
famous director,
yes,
who directed him several times.
Mm-hmm.
Some of his biggest movies had Humphrey Bogart in them, and you have him in that. You have drawing a blank here.
Sidney Greenstreet, Peter Lorre.
Peter Lorre was what I was trying to think of course, and Peter was also in with Bogart in the his probably his most famous movie, which again I'm drawing a blank on.
Casablanca.
Yes, Casablanca. Yes. Yeah. See, I get myself and I'm like, oh well, brain lock. Yes.
in fact, Laurie and Greenstreet have been in about 8 movies
Really?
together.
Yes.
Yeah, but The Maltese Falcon was actually Sidney Greenstreet's very first movie. He was 61 at the time, but he had been in theater for years.
Mhm.
So that's where his acting background. But this was his first movie, but certainly not his last. So I'd like to see him on screen.
Well, I didn't realize too, reading the book, that the Maltese Falcon had been made previously,
Yes.
and it had not done as well, and it had issues dealing with the censorship that the Hays Code or whatever that was involved at that time.
Hays Code. Yeah, the first one apparently was fairly risque. And there were a lot of scenes that there was no way in the world that the second and the third version were going to be able to do it. So, yeah, no, that was pre-Hays Code on that one. And for people who don't know, the Hays office started doing censorship. It was almost like prohibition for the movie industry.
Right.
in a certain respect, and it started about the same time, I think, as prohibition. But they just felt that there was just too much sex, violent, drinking, all sorts of stuff, going on in movies, and a lot of it was fueled by Christian groups.
Sure.
So we will not show it in our movie theaters in Milwaukee, or whatever, in the Midwest, because they felt it wasn't, ready for prime time, basically. But
well, in Maltese Falcon, Dashiell Hammett, there's some gay characters, if I remember right, correct, in the book.
yes,
Obviously the women, there's probably a little bit of sex in there as well, right? So
yeah, no, absolutely, and a lot of that was really toned down, and it had to be toned down in Casablanca as well.
Sure.
So,
yeah, that's the way it was then, and we might be switching back to it. Hopefully not, but with what's going on in the world. But yeah, it's anyway. But I never realized that someone else had made the movie previous. I guess there'd been a couple other versions before that.
There were 3. The one that we're familiar with was the third version, and the first one, as I said, was pre-Hays Code. The second did not use the title of the Maltese Falcon. It was called Satan Met a Lady, and it starred Betty Davis, and it had
Did they have Sam Spade in it?
Yeah,
the Sam Spade character was in it. Yeah, okay.
But I'm trying to remember off the top of my head if they actually used the name. They might have changed the name, but the person who played Sidney Greenstreet's character, Castor Goodman, that was a woman. They actually had a heavy-set woman play the character that he would have played in the original. And I think Warren William, I think played totally different than Bogart. Played the Sam Spade character, and Ricardo Cortez played the Sam Spade character in the very first version. I can't remember the woman's name off the top of my head, but one of the they had already bought the rights from Hammett, so they were able to, Warner Brothers was able to do whatever they wanted to do with it, and Huston was a very well-known and very successful screenwriter at that point, but he really wanted to make the transition into directing. So he offered to, when they approached him to do the script on the third version, he said, "I'll do it if you let me direct it." And because of his screenwriting, success, and also the guy was an actor. I mean, he had an acting background, and his father, Walter Huston, was a very famous actor. And in fact, Walter Huston, and I get into it in the book, was Captain Jacoby. He's not credited, but he played the guy that was shot up and was delivering the Falcon to Humphrey Bogart, Sam Spade, and then drops dead in his office.
Mm-hmm.
So, they ended up giving it to Houston, and when they were trying to cast it, they were thinking of Paul Muni, and they were also thinking of George Raft, and neither one of them wanted to be somebody who dies, or like a bad guy, or whatever. And they oh, I know what it was. Okay, I'm getting totally confused. I know Raft turned it down because he said, if you had two failed versions, I don't want to be like this is like, not only secondhand clothes, third-hand clothes.
Right.
It's like the thrift shop variety. So he turned it down. And it's funny because many times, in fact, he turned down, I know what I got confused with. He turned down High Sierra because he didn't want to be the bad guy that dies at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like every time Raft had turned down a role, they would give it to Bogart, and then Bogart would become famous as a result of it. And his career would start, making an upward swing. So, but apparently...
George would get jealous of Bogart, right? It's like,
trust me.
Major rivalry. Yeah.
I play that up.
Yeah.
Won't give that away.
Yeah.
Raft is in that one. And George Raft will also be in the next one too, because the third book, which I'm working on right now and will be out at the beginning of January in 2026, will be based on Casablanca.
I was wondering if you're going to give us any teasers. So Casablanca, I mentioned Casablanca. Well, you said Casablanca before I did because I couldn't remember, but
yes, it's based on
Ingrid Bergman is going to be in it too.
Ingrid Bergman, yes, and
Okay.
Paul Henreid and Claude Rains and Conrad Veidt. It's going to be a lot of fun. So
are there any issues with using famous names like that, writing about a book? If you're saying, well, it's fictionalized, it's okay. Do you have to get like usage rights or anything like that?
No, you do have to. The one thing you've got to be careful, and I joke about this, and I talk about this if I'm on like historical fiction panels or historical mystery panels at conventions, is that if it's already in print and it's a biography, it's nonfiction, and somebody like Errol Flynn had a reputation, okay?
Right.
In fact, a pretty bad reputation, despite the fact that he was like one of Warner Brothers' top stars. He was a womanizer. He drank too much. He got himself in trouble. He wound up in a major public court situation with a lawsuit because apparently he had sex with an underage girl. And I guess he didn't realize she was underage, or maybe she said something and he was too drunk or whatever. But that made headlines. If you talk something that's already been documented, as fact, it's fair game.
Right.
What you don't ever want to do is have the person do something very damaging that they never did.
Right.
And then you could get in trouble, if they've got heirs or, whatever. So if all of a sudden I say something really awful, like somebody that we all, love, is a drug addict and a womanizer and wanted to start a coup in Russia, or something crazy like that. No, they did not do that. And that is damaging to their reputation. So therefore, you can't do things like that. So,
well, the woman that Bogart's married in the second book, she seems jealous and she's a little crazy at times. Was that his real wife at the time?
It's all done. Yeah, it was his wife at the time, and that was Mayo Matho, and she was a morbid alcoholic, and she was very violent, and often she beat him up.
Oh.
She would throw things. She tried to stab him in the back with a knife. At one point she went berserk and she pretended to kill herself, and she was shooting holes in the ceiling. So she faked a suicide, thing going on. But this is all documented.
Right.
I mean, there are police reports about this.
Right.
So, nobody's really making that up.
Right.
And it is tricky though, because I'm working, I've got a scene in the book that I'm working on now where they find somebody murdered in the bushes of Jack Warner of Warner Brothers Studio, of his backyard. And now it's a fictional character, okay, but did he find anybody murdered in his backyard? Probably not. If
Right.
he did, it's covered up really well.
Right.
But I was able to make it plausible where there would not be any damage to anybody's reputation. And he didn't do it, obviously. So, but they're wondering, this poor guy who was working in our yard, why did somebody do this? So it's all part of the plot. So it is a fine line. You cannot damage somebody's reputation that doesn't deserve damaging.
Right.
Okay. But if, as I said, they're notorious already and they've done things, and it's documented historically, you can certainly, use that.
So can you give us a hint of what the title is going to be of the third book?
Oh, the third one is called
I say I got you stuck here. Yeah.
right.
Did you get sweetheart in it at all in the title? The famous line at the end.
Usual suspects.
Yeah.
So as opposed to round up the usual suspects, which is what Claude Rains said is Captain Renault all the time in Casablanca. So basically what happens in this one is, what happens at the very beginning, this is documented fact, is they discovered the script of Casablanca the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So, we've been launched into World War II already. World War II was already going on in Europe,
right,
and Asia, but the United States was still not involved. We're neutral. And so a lot of things start happening in the world, and there is a murder on one of the Warner Brothers films, and because they helped solve the murder in book 2, Jack Warner decides to hire Babs and Guy again. And but for some strange reason, everything that's going on in the world seems to conspire against them solving the crime. There's all sorts of crazy things that are coming on, which a lot of which has to do with the war. So lots of historical research. I can't tell you the stack of books that I've had to read, 4 feet high, that I had to read. And these are all nonfiction books, on what was going on at the time and the various stars involved. The good news is that I had already read a bunch of books on Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet, and Bogart, and Bogey's wife. So because I needed to do that for Blackbird. And so that research, and also Jack Warner, actually, because they were both Warner Brothers Productions. So I had a lot of that information kind of already in the back of my brain. But obviously I had to, read up on some of the other actors and a lot of the history of what was going on, at the time, both overseas and also in Los Angeles.
When you have an Asian character that's a part of it, are you going to get into the internment aspect of what happened to a lot of those type of character people during the after? Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah.
Very much so. Yes. Yeah. And that ties in a lot with the refugees and what's going on with the script of Casablanca and everything else. So yes, that's a very big deal. She, you are introduced to her. Babs ends up renting a room out to a Japanese gardener as her tenant in book 2. You're introduced to the guy, even though he's a very, very minor role, but he ends up getting a fairly major role in book 3 because while they're in pre-production for Casablanca is when they start having the executive order from FDR that Japanese are supposed to be removed from the West Coast. So that is one of the big deals that is kind of distracting, the private detectives from trying to solve this murder case.
And then this is up for a couple of awards, it looks like.
Yeah, this year I'll find out beginning of April. The Blackbird is up for the Humor and Satire Awards for the Mark Twains and for the Mystery and Mayhem, which they call for cozy and not so cozy mysteries. So, and I fall into the not so cozy.
It's not too. I mean, it's not too bad. I mean, there's not a lot of language and not a lot of sex or anything. So, I mean,
that's why
pretty mild. There's people dying, but it's not graphic.
Yeah, it's actually more technically soft boiled.
Yeah,
because I do have professional PIs, and it is in a large city. So we're not talking about small town B&B. We own a bake shop with magical talking can. It seemed like that. That's. I always think of something along those lines for the traditional cozy. But this one, yes, I do keep the language kind of down. And if there is any kind of sex, it's behind closed doors, it's implied. And in Blackbird, there are some dead birds, but you never see a bird being killed.
Well, people don't usually get too upset about birds, especially what they do to your car, right? When they're flying overhead, right? So dogs, another matter. Don't do anything with dogs. Yeah. So we're getting down here on time, so I'll make sure we cover a few other things. So writing, are you one of those? Are you one of those that outlines everything in advance, or are you a pantster? How do you put your books together?
I am such an outliner. I kind of go with the Jeffrey Deaver school. I can easily outline something over 250 pages of outlines.
Yeah. Well, as much detail, and especially being the period piece, probably requires that too. I mean, even if I'm a pantster all the way, but I don't know that I could write that type of book without outlining at least some of it.
My outlines take probably 2.5 to 3 months before I could even start writing the first chapter, easily. But believe it or not, with this third book that I'm working on right now, I'm doing a lot more pantsing than I usually do. And now, mind you, I did seriously outlining in the beginning, but it got to the point where I'd say about halfway, and I use the standard, screenplay 3-act structure. About halfway through Act 2, I was ready to say, well, I kind of know what's happening towards the end, but I'm not exactly sure how to get there. So I was working with my outlines and doing a lot of pantsing. So, which has been working okay. But again, this was with seriously outlining first, but now I'm kind of going into a lot of pantsing mode. So
you don't strictly stick to the outline. There are certain turns that may come along as you're writing, and you go, well, maybe this needs to go a little bit different direction.
Yeah, or I like this idea. Let's add this. I like to. One of the best books, and I hate the title of it only because you'll find out why. But one of the best books on the craft of writing that I have read is called Story Trumps Structure. Okay, now I don't like the title, right?
Yeah.
But, it's written by Stephen James, And I have taken workshops, writing workshops. If you ever have the opportunity to take a writing workshop with Stephen James, he's wonderful. He's a best-selling thriller writer. And I took the master class, or Master Craft Fest with him at Thriller Fest. And then I ended up taking his new writers intensive with Robert Dugoni, who's also amazing. And one of the things that I love, and I joke about it to Stephen every time I run into him, it's usually at Thriller Fest I run into Stephen. And I said, I feel like I'm your, unpaid PR person, but I'm always telling everybody about this book and my favorite chapter in your book. He said, well, which one is that? And I said, the one about the ceiling fan effect. And he said, the ceiling? Oh, and he said, yeah, that's a good one. And I said, yeah, I tell everybody that because I use that, principle all the time. And what the ceiling fan, have you ever heard of this? No, okay. What the ceiling fan effect is he was working as a substitute teacher. And years before, he started writing full-time for a living. And he was taking over a class, and the assignment was, what did you do for your summer vacation? And he figured, and he's getting like the same old kids, doing, and I did this, and we went to the beach, and, nothing exciting, right? Kind of a boring exercise. So finally he said, we're going to change this up a little bit. And we're going to say what went wrong during your summer vacation. So this one kid raised his hand and said, I got a story for you. Stephen lets him up in front of the class. And he said, this one we can all relate to a certain degree, because we're all kids, you all do crazy things. We all jump on beds pretending they're trampolines, right? I don't know anybody who did not do that as a kid,
Sure.
Right? I always wanted a trampoline in my backyard, never got one, but at least everybody got to jump on the beds. So this little kid got together for some family reunion or whatever, and he and his cousins were jumping on the beds in one of the bedrooms, and they were playing this game to see who could jump the farthest across the room would be the winner, right? So you jump, and spring. Almost like when you're swinging on a swing set, you try to, fly off the swing and see how far you can go, right? So they're playing this game, but they didn't take into account that the ceiling fan was going.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've hit those ceiling fans before, accidentally when you raise up your hands or something, and ow.
So this kid's playing the trampoline game on bed, and he starts to launch, but he gets caught on the ceiling fan, and he gets spun around the room and then flung across the room, and wins the contest. Of course, he could have gotten killed, doing this.
Absolutely.
But everybody in the classroom was like, it's like, oh my God, So the whole thing about the ceiling fan effect, according to Stephen James, is what else could go wrong? What could be worse? Well, imagine playing the game and then getting caught up in the ceiling fan. So a lot of times when I'm writing, and all of a sudden I'm saying, well, okay, but this is just going on at an even pace. I want to end my chapter with some kind of page-turning crisis or something. So it's like, okay, what could go worse? And then what could get worse after that? You always want to ask yourself those questions. And that's one of the best pieces of writing advice I ever got, as far as craft is concerned. So a lot of times if I outline, I don't get to that point. So, and I'll look at the chapter after I wrote it and I'll sort of say, you got to ramp this up a little bit. And I'll think about that ceiling effect, fan effect. And that's when I start pantsing a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but that's, I guess, one of the tips and tricks.
So I always ask, and we're about an hour and 24 minutes in here, so we'll start trying to wind down here a little bit. But I always ask everybody, the title of the show is Bringing Life to Characters. So what do you do? And you're using people that are already out there, other than Well, Babs is sort of based on your friend.
Right.
Guy may not be. I don't know if he's based on anyone, but what do you do? What do you look for when you're developing those characters?
I watch a lot of Turner Classic movies.
I was gonna say, in your case, right?
Yeah, no, I
Well, you
do.
fictionalize them somewhat, I'm assuming, right? You're adding a little bit to their characters,
Sure, but
maybe a little more fleshed out, maybe than people know, because you see the movie actor in the movies, but that's not the true person.
no, if I can, I try to watch as many documentaries on them to
Mhm.
actually see real footage of them off screen talking, when
Right.
they're not actually playing the character. And I will watch their movements, the way that they talk. That helps a lot. It really, really does. I just watched a really great documentary on Ingrid Bergman, and I was getting stuff that I couldn't even get from books, watching her.
Right.
And also hearing about, her kids talking about her and stuff. So it was good, but I try as much as I can do to get a hold of documentary footage, besides watching them do their characters as well.
Yeah, and obviously get them to jump off the page, because reading your book, seems to be a lot of characters.
Yeah,
You got a lot of famous names, and then some names people may not know as well. You do a good job of explaining, what their role was, and like the Maltese Falcon and stuff. I mean, people know Peter Lorre, obviously, and they obviously know Humphrey Bogart, maybe. I mean, some generations may not.
No, I know. In fact, usually when I get a not so great review, is from somebody who is not familiar,
Right.
with the characters. I hire an outside freelance editor, and I warned her. I said, "Have you watched Casablanca?" And she said, "Not for many years." I said, "Watch it before you edit my manuscript, please."
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to understand all that. So what events do you have? I believe you're coming to Denver, aren't you? I saw your name on the list. I will be there as well.
Yes, I'm going to Left Coast Crime. And straight from Left Coast Crime, I'm going to be going to Los Angeles. And I've got 3 book events in LA. So I'll be there for several weeks. I will be at the Vintage Paperback Show in Glendale. I will have I'll be with another author, Jerry Westerson, who writes Sherlock Holmes Mystery, and we're going to be at the Open Book in Woodland Hills. And I will also be reading at the Sisters in Crime Los Angeles chapters April meeting. And then I've got Malice Domestic at the end of April. And down the road, I know I'm going to be doing Thriller Fest. And I'm thinking of going to the Book Passage Writers Conference. It's something that's been in the back of my mind. And of course, I'm already signed up for Killer Nashville and for AboutYourCon in New Orleans. So, and definitely we'll be making kind of a long trip to LA at some point in the fall, as well as the one that I'm going to be in the spring. So those are some of the events and stuff I have.
A lot of flying miles, sounds like, for in your
future. I do approve my miles, and I do cash them in. So.
And you sent me this picture. This is some of your other books as well as the 2.
Yes, I have done 3 time travel books. The Time Traveler Professor series. There'll be one more. It's partially written. Right now, I'm obviously really tied up with my 3-book contract with Level Best Books. The others are either anthologies that I've had a short story in, or the Sherlock Holmes Mystery magazine. I've published a few articles.
And is there a book you want to write that you haven't written yet?
I have one. It's not done. It needs to major rewrites. But I've got a historical standalone that I'm working on. it starts out in New York and ends in Hollywood. And I have 3 suspense novels also with humor, but very, very different from this Golden Age of Hollywood series. And those take place in the 90s. And I've written them. I had a bad agent before the one I have now. So I knocked him off, and I thought she was sending out the first one, and she never did.
Oh.
So long, crazy story I'd rather not get into, but I literally have 3 finished novels sitting on the shelf that are unpublished in a series, and I would love to find a home for them at some point. So, and I have a few other ideas. So, including, and I've been telling all my Sherlock Holmes friends, I'm going to bring Basil back to role.
Yeah.
So, in a Hollywood mystery that I've got on the back burner. Right now, I've got to finish my Casablanca project before I can think of anything else.
So do you think there'll be any more after the 3 when it comes to the Hollywood type ones? Or other than that one sort of sounds like it, but.
Well, I do have other Hollywood, mystery things in mind. That really depends on my agent and my publisher.
Right.
That's one series, yeah.
Hey, you win a couple awards. Yeah.
Yeah, our contract is only for the 3, and depends beyond that. So.
And are you going to be on any panels at Left Coast Crime?
Yeah, I am going to be on one as a panelist, and it's about using real characters.
There you go. I'll have to sure to sit in on that one if it's not the same time. I'm on one panel too. Hopefully it's not the same time, but.
And I'm also moderating it. That one's a Friday panel, I think.
Okay, mine's on Thursday, so good. I'll get a chance to see it then.
And I'm moderating a panel on Saturday, which is a little outside of my comfort zone, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That means I learned something.
Right.
And I actually have built up a pretty good reputation of being a good moderator. I could pretty much, unless it's something that I really loathe, which there aren't that many, things that I, really are so far in left field, they just don't really work for me. But I am moderating a panel on senior sleuths.
Senior sleuths, oh.
Yes. So, but I've got some really good panelists. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I've been reading some of their books, and enjoying them. And I did, when I was chosen to be the moderator on that panel, I did let them know. I said, by the way, I don't write about senior sleuths. I said, my sleuths are, barely in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're kind of young and inexperienced, but there's clearly not senior sleuths. But I said that doesn't mean I can't moderate the panel, and do my research. So I will be moderating that panel. So, and it'll be good because we've got some really, really good writers in that panel. So, as I said, I'm doing my, doing my research and, reading their stuff. So, it'll be good.
Yeah, because at Left Coast, actually the 2 guest honors are going to be my next 2 guests on my show, which is afterwards. But I've got Manuel Ramos. Let's see here. I've got the thing so I can throw it up now. Manuel Ramos. He's going to be in like a week and a half.
Okay.
He's a Colorado author, and then Sarah Paretsky, which does the V.I. Wojorski. I'm going to screw that name up, I'm sure, but.
I know Sarah's fabulous. She's really
but she agreed to be on the show, and I'm going to have her just that right before the event, and then I'm going to have one other author that's going to be at the event, but she's not a guest of honor. But I was really happy that they both agreed to be on, so I was like, great, because I'll be there. But I'm going to be on a panel. We're going to be talking about it. They didn't give us much of a guideline. They just gave us a name: Crime in Colorado.
Oh.
Crime in Colorado. That was. didn't really give us the
Yeah.
Marina, who's the moderator. She goes, "Oh, well, that kind of covers a lot of things. So, what do you guys think we should talk about?" So,
Oh,
I had
that's
sent her something today. So,
I'll tell you exactly the name of, let's see, Left Coast Crime panels, let's see, what's the name of this thing? It's called Using Real Life in Fiction. That's the
oh yeah,
one that I'm going to be a panelist on, and the other one, it just said Senior Sleuths. That's all I was given.
yeah.
So, you know,
So not senior writers, but the actual characters are senior characters, I'm assuming.
Yes. And I'm glad actually, because I wasn't, one of the things that I wanted to be able to distinguish is who's writing the amateur sleuth and who is writing the professional sleuth. Right. And we've got a mix.
Yeah,
you know, I was hoping to get some, you know, that it wasn't all like senior sleuth cozies, you know, amateur, you know, cozies. I was hoping to maybe get like a retired detective that kind of gets pulled back into action, you know, or somebody has just been around a long time, you know, and you know, and it looks like you know, I'm getting a, you know, kind of an interesting mix. So and I'm gonna, you know, have them play, you know, play against that too in the panel. Because I like the idea of because, you know, as I said, my people are former actors, but they are professionals. You know, they're willing to show the certificate or the card. You know, it's like, I am licensed, believe it or not. You know, I might look like a kid, but, you know, but I'm a PI. And of course, with Bam, she's a female and she's a real PI.
Right.
She's this gorgeous former actress. So nobody believes him. You know, they figured, oh, come on, she's just a pretty face. You know, she shouldn't be out, you know, trying to solve crime.
Well, yeah, Ben's like, why aren't you at home cooking something or whatever, right? Or cleaning a house, right?
And that's how her mother feels. You know, mother wants her to get back together with her ex-husband, who was like an abusive, crazy guy. You know? He showed up every time to give her hell. So, but it is like, one of the things though that I do get into is it's laugh out loud funny. And the first one, Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, will remind you of a screwball comedy from the 40s, you know, on TCM. Blackbird, and I warned everybody about this, is much darker.
Yeah.
Still a lot of humor in it, but it is much darker. And it's their first murder case. So
well, there's a lot of chaos with the animals too.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm not reading that first couple chapters is like there's just animals all over the place.
Yes.
Causing trouble.
Yes. A foul mouth, loud talking, a wisecracking.
Yes.
It sounds like a Warner Brothers character.
Yes. A minor bird, right? Yes. He's got a pretty big vocabulary. He speaks a lot, and long sentences and stuff.
Yeah, no, he's a character, and what's so funny though, and this is like one of those like kismet moments when you're doing research for a book like this, is I'm reading one of Jack Warner's biographies, and at some point he said, you know, because sometimes the guy will like curse and, you know, say all sorts of bad things about people, and you know, he is who he is, you know. But the thing is that at one point, and this is the truth, it's in one of his biographies, somebody got him a minor bird, and apparently he outcursed the minor bird, and the bird went berserk and they had to give it away. And I actually took that and used it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're laughing, you know, because they've got this obnoxious minor bird that they would love to get rid of. Yeah. Head of Warner Brothers has a story about a minor bird. So.
How funny. Well, we probably ought to wrap things up. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover?
No, I think we're okay.
Right.
I'm at my first in-person book book event at the Mysterious Bookshop in New York City, and this will be on Thursday, March 6th. I'll do a signing and a short interview. And
Nice.
if you can't make it because you're not in New York City, we are going to try to set up something like what you're
Like
saying.
a Zoom or something,
Yeah,
yeah.
something live, Facebook Live or something.
And when's that?
This is going to be Thursday, March 6th.
March 6th. Okay. Well,
Yes.
I'll have to keep watching your face. I didn't get a chance to talk about your little post, but anyone who gets on Facebook, you need to look for her. She puts some really funny stuff that people can caption and stuff. I grabbed a couple of them here. There are some that you put up there, and I'm like, immediately something comes to mind. This one is a funny one. First time I saw that, and several people did. Hershey's Kisses, of course.
Yeah, of course.
That's what it looks like. And I don't know where you find all these pictures at. I mean, you must have some search engine. And then you put a lot of cats and dogs. That one was a little freaky that you did, I think, today.
Yes.
It was like a three-headed monster. And then, yes, that one there, several people grabbed what I was thinking, because I was thinking the Green Hornet, but, like a homogenized Green Hornet, a white hornet. But yes, you need to go on there. You post, I don't know, 2 or 3 a day sometimes, depending on what you find.
In the morning, I do caption contest, give me your best or worst. In the evening, I do wrong answers only,
Right.
Which I usually take a still from either a famous movie or a very obscure movie.
Right.
And people, make commentaries on it. And I also started doing your daily dog and your daily cat. So you get like a really funny picture like the cat one that I posted today, or you get a dog one. And I did that because for some reason, it wasn't planned that way. That's kind of the pantsing part of it, is that there is an animal theme with
Sure.
my golden age of Hollywood, novels. So,
Well, it's a nice, I enjoy seeing it showing up on the timeline, because it's always a nice distraction from all the other crap that you see on social media these days. And I enjoy it. Like I said, sometimes I see something and I have no idea what to say about that picture. And there are other times when I'm like, bang, pops in my head right away. And there's always some great comments. Usually you get 15 or 20 comments at least on most of those.
Yeah, no, and it's really fun when you get some famous, fairly big authors, making comments. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I saw Reed Farrell Coleman comments every now and then, and Reed has been a guest on here, and he and I met at BoucherCon, and he was a great guy to talk with, and he kind of lives in your neck of the woods there. He's a New York guy.
Long Island, but yes.
But there's your website. Check out all your books down at the bottom there. And I appreciate you being on. Always enjoyed talking with you and posting with you. And I will see you at Left Coast here in about a month.
Forward to see you at Left Coast. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's in my neck of the woods, so we don't have to go too far for us for once. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it to Killer Nashville. I really want to go to BoucherCon this year, but the scheduling may not work right for us this year, but we'll see. Because Michael Connelly is going to be there, and I'd love to meet Michael Connelly. I hear he's a great guy, and I have a lot of his Bosch books here. Love to get a signature from him, but we'll see. And Killer Nashville has always been, I've gone the last 4 years, and I've been lucky enough to win a couple of awards there, so that was always nice. And Clay always puts on a great event, so I'm hoping to make it this year. It might be one of those where I may just fly in for the award show. We'll see if I can make it for the whole event.
I really like Killer Nashville. That's a fun event, and in a certain way, it reminds me, but in a more relaxed, I guess, atmosphere of some of the stuff that goes on at Thriller Fest.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have a lot of an FBI agent, a retired FBI agent, will be hang out for 2 hours and kind of go through, what an undercover operation or something would be like. And most conventions don't have, panels and stuff like that. And I know, and Killer Nashville does. So does Thriller Fest. But It's
Yeah, Clay puts on a good show. It's more of a learning conference. You get a lot of information there, and you
more right.
obviously can meet agents and stuff like that. But
You don't really get a lot of readers there, I don't think.
Yeah, you don't get quite as many. Where BoucherCon, it was a little more of a mix. There were a lot of readers there, though. BoucherCon this year, oh my gosh, that event was a lot of walking. I was so tired.
Oh, I know, that huge hotel.
I don't know where they're holding it in New Orleans, but hopefully it's not quite as much walking as it was there at the Gaylord. So
seriously, don't think so.
And it was god awful hot, which it'll probably be pretty hot though in New Orleans too, because it's going to be the first week of September. So
yes, it will probably be very hot in New Orleans. So we get a reprieve.
Well, safe trips. You're going to LA next, or it would be Denver before?
I'm going to LA right after Denver.
Right after Denver. Okay.
Right. So I'll be in LA for about 3 weeks, and then get a little bit of a break before going down to Alice Domestic, North Bethesda. But I'm also like on a deadline to finish my book 3, so I'm doing a lot of stuff going on.
Gotta get some work done too in the process, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's why you got that trusted computer with you wherever you go, right?
It's true. It's true.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. It was great getting to know a little more about you and your books. And I will send you a link for the event.
Oh, great.
For this, where people can watch it later. And I will also give you the option to download the file as well. And you can put it on your website if you want. It'll be a big file, but whatever you want to do. But appreciate you being on. And I'll put you backstage right now. I'll say goodbye to everybody. And if you want to talk a little bit afterwards, you can hang on or you can hang up, whichever you want to do.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. And next, I don't have one next week, but the 27th, I have Manuel Ramos on. And then Sarah Paretsky will be on the week after that. So a lot of good guests. And then I'll have Loy Herbst, who's also going to be at Left Coast Crime. So getting a lot of authors there, and hopefully I have a bunch more. But everyone take care, and we'll see you in about 10 or 12 days.